ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. A very warm greetings to one and all. Today we are going to discuss about the fourth unit of KSET or NET as per the syllabus, that is about communication. We will try to discuss about the communication, effective communication, classroom communication, and the media of communication will be dealt by some another resource person. So, our focus will be entirely on the module of communication. So, let us start up with the basics of communication with a particular quote. See, the quote is given by the Gilbert Emilio, and he says developing excellent communication skill is absolutely essential to effective leadership. The leader must be able to share the knowledge and ideas to transmit a sense of urgency and enthusiasm to others. If a leader can get a message across clearly and motivate others to act on it, then having a message doesn't even matter. See, the very well said quote, and by this we can come to know about the effectiveness or the significance of the term communication. Communication, it is not only required by the leader, management or the managers, even a person in the personal aspect. Communication is required for each and every individual. You can't see this with only for the scope of your examination, but for your entire life this kind of information would help you or would facilitate you. So, let us start up with the syllabus first. What I am going to deal in the unit 4 is about the communication, the definition, the types and characteristics of the communication, and the other important aspects in this particular subject. Then the effective communication, in that verbal, non-verbal, intercultural, group communication, and the classroom communication. Classroom communication would be the another session which I will be dealing with, and lastly we will discuss about the barriers of the effective communication. So, let us start up with the meaning first. Communication. So, how do we pronounce it? See, the pronunciation is communication. The literal meaning of the communication is, it is a process by which the information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, or it can be a behavior. See, it is very much easier. What is the communication? It is a continuous process wherein the information, the facts, figures, symbols, language, emotions, ideas, information would be shared from one individual to at another individual or the group of people by a common system. That is, it may be a words, it may be a symbols, signs, pictures, or it can just be your emotions or the feelings or behavior. That is what we mean to say by the word communication. Then the question may arise that when the communication have been started, that is, what is the origin of the communication? See, that we can't exactly trace out what exactly would be the origin, or this is where the communication have been started. But we can say when the people have started living in a group, when the people started recognizing the importance of being in a group, at that time there felt an essence of interacting with each other. So, for interacting there must be a means, and that means has become a term communication, or that is where the communication have been started. That is what it has been written. Communication is as old as the human civilization. The need for the production lead to the group, and the group development forms a communication also develop, because as a group they have to interact from one another. For interaction purpose the communication have been developed. Communication was in the forms of codes. At the earlier stage, at the beginning stage, it was in the form of a code, it was in the form of indications, it was in the form of signals or just an expressions, because the word or the literal meaning of the word may not be pronounced, or they were not able to pronounce, or the other person was not able to understand. So, at the initial stage it was only the codes, indications, signals, or just an expressions. Then gradually with the increase in the population, with the specialization of the work, that is what we call it as division of work, exchange of economy or the scope of the economy increases, the demand for the communication or the need for the communication arises. Hence, we have so many languages, so many kind of verbal and non-verbal communication are available today. So, coming to the meaning and definitions of the communication, there are n number of definitions which has been given for the term communication. We will try to discuss or we will try to highlight only the few in those. That is, communication can be defined as the process of transmitting information. See, we are saying it is a process because it is a continuous in nature. We can't say the communication will have a start and will have an end. The communication may have a start, but it does not end. Okay? So, it is a continuous process. Communication can be a process of transmitting information and common understanding. Why common understanding? See, instead of English, instead of the local languages, if I start speaking French, Greece, Chinese, can you able to understand it? I hope no, until and unless you have a knowledge of that particular language. See, that is what we call it as a common understanding. We must transfer the information and there should be a common understanding. Then only we can term it as a communication as per the Caton. Then the word communication has been derived from the Latin word which means communis or which means common in nature. Okay? It has been taken from the Latin word that is communis, the meaning of which is common in nature. Then the definition underscores the fact that unless a common understanding results from the exchange of the information, see, unless the common understanding is there, whatever I am going to speak now, if you are not able to understand, then we won't term it as a communication. Okay? If you are able to follow me, if you are able to understand whatever I am trying to convey you, then we can term it as a communication. Okay? Else we do not call it as a communication, or we can call there is no communication at all. Then the process of the communication is the process of creating and exchanging means through symbolic interaction. Many of the time, if the person is standing too far from you, okay, and if he or she is visible, then instead of yelling at them, what is that you will do? You will make certain kind of a symbols to convey the message to them. So, even the process of it is a process of creating and meaning through the symbolic interactions also. That kind of a stuff we also called as a communication, and we call that as a non-verbal communication. See, the communication is a process, okay, constantly moves and changes. Whatever so far I have dealt from 5 minutes, if you want me to repeat that, then same as it is I am unable to repeat in the same sentences with the help of a same words or with the help of a same examples. It is not quite possible. So, it always moves and it always changes. It does not stand still. Meaning involves thoughts, ideas, understanding shared by the communication. Okay? Not only the words, not only the information, even the ideas, the thoughts, the feelings, emotions, if we share and the other person is able to understand that, then we can term it as a communication. Then symbolic means that we rely on the words and non-verbal behavior to communicate meaning and the feeling. Not only we will rely on the words, but many of the time we rely on the non-verbal clues as well. Okay? In the later part of this, we will try to understand what is verbal and what is non-verbal. Okay. So, next coming to the nature of the communication. See, the nature of the communication is first and foremost, there has to be the exchange of information between two or more people. Now, I am a sender and you are the receiver. If you put in a message in the chat box, okay, or a question in the chat box, then you will become a sender and I will become a receiver. In the process, we will try to discuss about that. So, for the communication to happen, there has to be two or more people involved in the process. Then it is required that there be both a sender and a receiver. As I said, at least or a minimum 2 person must be required for communication to happen. Communication is reciprocal. What is reciprocal? It is a give and take. Okay? a give and take, that is what we call it as a reciprocal. So, at any time the sender is sending a message, the receiver is also sending a message. It is specifically true when there is a face to face interaction. Now, because at this particular time, okay, I am delivering a lecture, but in another particular time you will be listening to this particular recording. So, there at this moment it is not quite possible, but once you put in questions in a chat box or anything in the chat box, if I go through that, then there the communication will, the process of communication will complete. Then effective communication entails the sender encoding a message and transmitting it to the receivers, where the receivers decodes a message. See, now whatever I want to tell you, whatever the information I want to pass to you, what I am doing, I am trying to encode it in my brains with the help of English language. Then I will speak out that. So, what is that it will happen? You will listen to what I am speaking, you will try to understand that. In understanding, you are trying to decode the message. Okay. So, for the effective communication, I have to encode as a sender and pass it on, and you have to receive it, you have to listen it, you have to understand, that is you have to decode a message, then the communication would complete. Then you may ask a question, what are the objectives of a communication? Why the communication is required, or what are the purposes of communication? See, the objectives of the communication can vary on the context of the specific goal or the specific reason of the communication, but in general the listed, these are the objectives, or these may be the objectives of having a communication or starting a communication. It may be just for information sharing, that what is that we are doing now. We are passing on the information to you people, so that you can able to understand these concepts, and which would help you to crack your NET or KSET examination. So, for information sharing, the communication may happen. It may happen because of understanding certain concept, certain thing, or we need to pass on certain message to someone. So, for understanding purpose, the communication may happen. Because just to influence someone, to persuade someone, the communication may happen. Like lot many people, lot many entrepreneurs, lot many politicians, they give the speeches so that they can influence the people, or they can persuade the people to do or not to do certain things. The communication may be helpful for the decision making. Many of the time we, okay, if I am in middle and I am in a confusion that whether to do this or that, I may go and ask my friend, ask my experts, ask my superiors, ask my teacher, ask an expert. Okay. So, in the process, what it does, it helps me to solve the problem. Okay. Solve the problem or to make the decisions. Hence, it will help the decision making as well as the problem solving. Relationship building. See, it is said that 80% of the misunderstanding in a family, okay, with the friends, with the colleagues, will happen just because of the lack of communication. We are unable to communicate with them. We are unable to take an initiation to go ahead and have a word with them. Because of that, 80% of the misunderstanding will be because of the lack of communication. If there is a misunderstanding with you, just take an example, or you just go and have a word with them. Many of the time just a word is enough to overcome the misunderstanding. Just a communication, initiation of the communication is much more than enough. That is why we say for the relationship building, the communication is very much essential. Then conflict resolution. As I said, 80% of the conflict in the workplace will be just because of the lack of communication. We are unable to communicate because of any of the reason, because it may be a superiority. I may think that I am superior than my colleague. So, why should I go and communicate with him or her? She may think that I am inferior to him. How should I go and speak with them? So, many of the time the conflict can be resolved with the help of the communication itself. Then entertainment or engagement. Okay. entertainment. Now, see what we are doing is an educatement. Okay, that is, if you go to the movies, if you listen to a song, okay, if you surf the internet, if you play a game, what is that you are doing? You are trying to communicate, or the director and the producer is trying to or the actors are trying to communicate with you with their predefined roles. Likewise, even the engagement, if you want to engage with certain kind of a work, certain kind of activities, certain kind of issues, then you have to come out and you have to communicate with, or you have to start up with the communication. Then education and learning, it is very much required in the education and learning, as we are doing so. Okay, we are doing nothing but we are trying to communicate with each other. Okay, wherein I am trying to speak and you are trying to listen. Okay, if you are trying to raise a question or raise an issue, then you will be a sender, you will be a speaker, and I will become a listener. Okay, so for the education and learning, the communication is required. For motivating, like your parents motivate you, your spouse, your friends, your family members, your colleagues, okay, they motivate you, and for motivation we require a communication. For the feedback, yes, if you want to give a feedback to us regarding our classes, regarding our efforts, then the communication would be only the means wherein you can give us a feedback. Social interaction, like if you mingle with the society, you mingle with your friends, you interact with them, you chat with them, okay, the discussions, dialogues, these are all nothing but the ways of communication itself. Where not the communication is required, it is required in every day. Okay, it is required in every day, every minute of a person, the communication is much more required. Hence, these are certain kind of objectives because of which the communication is required. Then the concept of communication, that is nothing but again the few more definitions of the communication. The first and foremost given by the Alan Lewis, he says communication is the sum of all the things. What all the things means? It is telling, listening and understanding. Okay. Now, I am telling you, you are listening and you are trying to understand it. So, this is what the communication is. It is a systematic activity under any given circumstances. Why systematic? Because there is a proper word, proper terminology, proper tone, proper pitch for every word. For every single word I am going to speak, the tone will be different, the way I speak would be different, the pauses will be different. Hence, it has a systematic activity. For every word there is a meaning, hence we call it as a systematic. Okay. Then as per Henry Kunch, he says communication is the transferring information from one person to another, whether or not he or she elicits that confidence. Okay. I hope it is much more easier, transferring the information from one person to another person. Then George Terry, he says communication is the exchange of the ideas, exchange of the feelings, exchange of the emotions between two or more people. If I am sharing the information, if I am sharing the ideas, if I am sharing my feelings with you people, or if I am sharing my emotions with you people, then we can call that as a communication as per the George Terry. Then Kate Davis defines the purpose of passing information and understanding between two people or two person is what we call it as a communication. See, it is well said that without the bridge of the communication, no one can cross the river of misunderstanding. As I said, 80% of the conflict, 80% of the misunderstanding will be because there is no proper channel or there is no proper initiation in the communication. So, if you want to pass on the bridge of the conflict or the misunderstanding, then the communication will act as a bridge. Communication is a systematic process of sharing the ideas, sharing the information, feelings, emotions from one person to another person by creating mutual understanding. See, the mutual understanding is much more required. That is what I am intended to say. Okay. You have to understand in the same manner, in the same sense, then only the communication process will be completed. Okay. The next one, characteristics of a communication or the features of communication. So, to if the communication process has to complete, then there must be two or more people involved in a communication. If I communicate with myself, then in the actual sense or in the business communication, we will not call that as a type of a communication, though that is one of the type, but in actual sense it is not termed as a communication. So, for communication to happen, there must be two or more people involved in the process of communication. Then the exchange of ideas. See, the exchange of ideas does not mean only the idea has to be exchanged. Here the exchange of idea means the exchange of ideas, information, facts, figures, it may be the emotions, the feelings, the behavior. So, the exchange of anything has to happen. And the third point, which I already covered, that is mutual understanding. Whatever my intention is, you have to understand in the same sense. Then direct and indirect communication. The communication may be direct or it may be indirect. Now, what we are doing is a form of indirect communication. If you are talking face to face, okay, if we are interacting face to face, then we can call it as a direct communication. Then, as I said, communication is a never ending process, it is a continuous process, it has a start, but it has never end. Then it is the use of words as well as the use of the symbols. We are going to use the words, symbols, expressions, okay. These all will be covered in the communication. These are the major characteristics which we need to keep in mind, so that the communication can be effective. Then coming to the next thing, that is the types of communication. There are basically 4 types of communication are there. The first one we call it as a verbal communication. The second is about the non-verbal communication. Next is written communication, and the fourth one is the visual communication. So, let us try to discuss one by one what is verbal communication, what are the subtypes available in the verbal communication. See, verbal communication is nothing but it involves the use of the words, sounds, language and a speech. Okay. Now, what I am doing? I am using the language, English language, with the help of the words, with the help of a sound, and I am speaking now. So, it is an example of a verbal communication. Okay. In the verbal communication, we yet have another 4 different types of a verbal communication. That is, the first one is intrapersonal communication. What is intrapersonal? See, intra means within. Okay. If I speak with me, okay, if I communicate with me, it may be a thoughts, it may be actions, it may be anything. If I speak with me, then that is what we call it a intrapersonal, that is with oneself. If you communicate with yourself, then that will become intrapersonal communication. In the communication, it is a type of a communication, but in the actual sense, in the business communication, we do not term it as a type of a communication, because speaking with oneself, okay. See, if you remember the objectives or the characteristics, what we said, if the communication has to happen, there has to be 2 or more people involved. Here, what is that we are doing? The person involved is only me. I am speaking with me, I am interacting with me, I am communicating with me. Hence, it is not the actual type of a communication, but in the real sense, if we see in the verbal communication, it is also a kind of communication, that is intrapersonal communication. Then the next one is interperson. Inter means with another. Okay. This form of a communication takes place between 2 individuals and is thus a one-on-one conversation. Here, two individuals are involved to communicate. one will act as a sender and the another will act as a receiver. If we are interacting face to face now, okay, because I am speaking, I will become a sender and you will become a receiver. If you are speaking, you will become a sender and I will become a receiver. Okay. Then the next one is small group communication. Okay. Here what will happen usually, for example, a classroom communication. Okay. A classroom communication will be a type of a small group communication. If a person, if a teacher is trying to give a lecture to a say for example, a 20 or 25 people in a class, then that will become a small group communication. If a corporate presentation is happening in a XYZ company and the employees are sitting and listening to it, then we can call it as a small group communication. Okay. Then the public communication, for example, our Honorable Prime Minister addresses the gathering. The public will be huge, in huge number, in thousands and sometimes in lakhs together. That is what we call it as a public communication, where if you are speaking, if you are interacting with the large number of audience, then we can call it as a public communication. See, in the interpersonal communication, there is the chances of a feedback. The communication process will complete. In a small group communication, each and every person will have a chance to interact with each other, to act as a sender, to act as a receiver, and the interaction can happen, the feedback can happen. But in the public communication, only many of the time only the sender will speak and the receivers will only receive. The receivers will try to give the feedback with the help of applauses, with the help of a nodding, or with the help of only the emotions. Many of the time they won't get the chance to speak or act as a sender in the public communication. Okay. So, these are the types of the verbal communication. Now, we will try to go to the next type of a communication, that is non-verbal communication. See, it is one of the important aspect, it is one of the significant aspect in the type of communication, because many of the time, many of the people, or even you can take an example, or you can take an example of yourself. Try to observe that whether you follow the words of a person or whether you follow the actions of a person. Okay. Now, the time does not permit, or the time does not permit, hence we are not able to do certain kind of exercises, else I would have showed you in the better way that how the people will really rely on the non-verbal communication. So, let us try to see what exactly is a non-verbal communication. See, the non-verbal communication means the verbal, the words, the speech, the language, okay, will not be used in this. That is what non-verbal. This form of a communication supersedes all other form. See, what we are using supersedes means it is much more important comparing to all other earlier form of a communication. Okay. Why? We will try to discuss. Okay. Non-verbal communication is involve the use of the physical ways of communication, such as a tone, a voice, a touch, a expression. Okay. If without the help of a words, without the help of a language, without the help of a speech, if you try to communicate with the help of a symbols, signs, emotions, then we can term that as a non-verbal communication. Symbols and sign languages are also included in the non-verbal communication. Your body posture, the language convey a lot of non-verbal message. So, for example, if you ask something and if your father just give a look at you, then you can understand whether he agreed for it or non-agreed for it, isn't it? Likewise, the non-verbal is much more important than the verbal communication. Then, for example, the folded arm, if the folded arm is there, then it conveys something. For example, even the handshake, the way you give the handshake to someone, that will convey whether you are confident, whether you are trying. For a simple example, if I give a handshake like this, then what I am trying to prove, without without spelling a word, I am trying to prove that I am superior to you. Or if I give a handshake like this, then I am trying to prove I am inferior than you. So, see, the way of giving a handshake will spell about the emotions, the feelings what you feel. Okay. The cross side means submission, that is a defensive in posture. Okay. Then the next one is written communication, and in many of the time we have used this, and in business communication most of the communication will happen in the written format itself. So, as to it will act as a evidence, it will act as a documentation, it will act as a future references. For example, in the verbal communication, in the non-verbal communication, if I want to recollect it, if I want to act as a evidence, then it will not be evidence, or I can't refer in the future about what has happened at that particular moment. But if it is in the written format, then I can easily recollect it. So, written communication is the medium through which the message of the sender is conveyed with the help of a written words or with the help of a typed words. Letters, personal journals, emails, reports, articles, your chats through the Facebook, Twitters, WhatsApp, okay, memos, circulars, these all are the forms of the written communication itself. Unlike other forms of the communication, written messages can be edited. See, if there is a spell mistake in this particular slide, so what I can do? I can go and edit that particular spell mistake before I will start my presentation, or in middle also I can do it, but it will look awkward. But in the verbal communication, so for example, if I make a mistake now, can I edit it? Can I delete it? Can I remove it? Now, because we are going digital, I can do it, but actually in the face to face communication it is not quite possible. Then this form of a communication encapsulate the features of the visual communication as well. Many of the visual communication will be included in the written communication itself. Earlier it was a part of a written communication, now we have made it at another type of a communication as a visual communication, because we are living in a digital era. Okay. See, especially when the message are conveyed through the electronic devices such as the laptops, phones, visual presentation that involves the use of the text on the words. See, now we are doing it in the electronic format, yet you are able to read it because I have typed it. So, you are able to read it, hence we can encapsulate, that is we can include this in the visual communication as well as in the written communication as well. Then the next one is visual communication. See, this form of a communication involves the visual display of the information. Now, you are seeing it, you are seeing the content on your screen. So, you are able to see it, isn't it? So, we can say it as it is also a form of a visual communication, wherein the message is understood or expressed with the help of visual aids. For example, it may be a photography, it may be a signs, it may be a symbols, it may be a maps, it may be a colors, it may be a posture, it may be a banner, it may be a design, it may be anything. If you see a particular, for example, now you can able to see this particular thing. What is it? Now, you are going to imagine, you are going to see, and you are going to analyze, and you are going to start imagining what exactly is this, isn't it? I showed a picture and you are able to recollect it because you have come across with this kind of a stuff. Likewise, movies, plays, television shows, video clips and all other electronic forms are the examples of the visual communication. Now, we are really very much dependent on the visual communication, because as per one of the survey, it shows more than 2 hours of our daily life we spend on looking at a particular screen. It may be your laptop, it may be your mobile, it may be the TV screen. Okay. So, on an average 2 hours of the individual life per day will be spent looking at a particular screen itself. Next, visual communication also involves the transfer of information in the form of a text, which is received through an electronic medium. like what you are reading now. Okay. That is an example of a visual communication. The icons, the emojis are the form of a visual communication. When these icons are used in the public places, phones or computers, they interact the user about the meaning and the usages. For example, the symbol of a petrol pump, that shows the petrol pump is right there. Okay. Then the great example of the visual communication is the World Wide Web. Okay. WWW, that is the browser which communicates with the masses. There are crores or billions of people who are using the browsers now for the communication, using a combination of a text, design, links, images, colors, maps, what not. Okay. All these are the visual features which requires us to view the screen in order to understand the message which has to be being conveyed. So, in present era, okay, most of us have forgotten how to write. Okay. For each and everything we are relied on the visual communication. So, slowly the earlier what I said, the written communication, okay, in written communication the visual communication can be included in the written communication. Now, the day will come wherein the visual communication has to be replaced by the written communication, and the day will come very sooner. Then the next thing is about the communication process. Okay. What is the communication process? The communication process involves the various stages wherein the communication, where exactly it will start and how the process will continue. As I said, it has a start, but it has no end. It is a continuous process. So, it starts with the sender. So, what the sender will do? The sender will try to encode. Now, as I said, whatever I am trying to spell out, whatever I am trying to tell you, first what is that I will do? I will try to think. Okay. I will try to think and I will try to express that with the help of English language. Hence, that is what the encoding will take place in the brains itself, in the face to face communication. Then what will happen? After encoding, if I am ready, then I will speak, that is the message, or I will type, then I will use a channel. Okay. Now, what is a channel? The Akka TV is a channel, okay, because of which we are trying to interact with each other. You go through the channel, you go through the Akka TV channel, then you will try to listen to this particular audio or anything, any videos, then you will become a receivers. What is that you will do? Once you receive, once you start listening, then you will try to decode it, you will try to understand it, okay. Then you will try to give a feedback. Okay. As I said, in the face to face or in the classroom communication, the feedback, or in the small group communication or in the face to face communication, the feedback would be spontaneous, but in this kind of a format, the feedback would be a bit later on. Okay. Then you will choose a medium for giving a feedback. For example, you may call when there is a session of interaction with the expert, or you may just put a question in the chat box, or if you know someone in an university, you may give a call to them that I want to know about this and this, or you may choose yet another method, and it will go as a sender or it will go back to the sender. Okay. Then the sender will again encode pass the message, choose a channel, so it has to reach the receiver. The receiver will try to decode it, understand it and give a feedback. For giving a feedback, they will choose a channel. So, in this way the loop of the communication process will continue, but many of the time the communication process will not be effective or would not be successful. Why? Because there will be certain kind of barriers, and likewise the noise is also a barrier. In the barriers of communication, we will try to discuss what are the other types of barriers, how we need to overcome that particular barrier. See, this is what we call it as a transaction model of a communication. For example, you may say on the left side you are there, on the right side your friend is there. So, first what will happen? You as a sender will try to encode a message, you choose a channel, okay, and you pass on the message. The friend or your friend will act as a receiver, they will decode it, they will receive, they will understand, okay. Then they will give a feedback to you. When they are giving a feedback, they will encode the feedback, choose a channel and pass on the message. You receive the message, you try to decode it, you try to understand. See, this is how the process of the communication will go, and as I said, all the time the communication will not be effective or successful because of the barriers. Wherever the noise is there, those will act as a barriers of the communication. Okay. In the next upcoming slides, we will also discuss the barriers of the communication. Say, barriers of the communication. See, the information to be communicated must be clear and accurate. If the information is not clear, if the information is not accurate, then the communication will not be successful. Okay. Whatever you have to talk, it has to be in the clear, it has to be the concise manner, to the point, and it has to be accurate enough. Then only the communication will be successful, else it will be act as a barrier. Then if an individual sends the message and the other one receives it and interrupts in the same way as the sender has intended to express, the process of a communication is said to be complete and successful. But many of the time, because of the existence of the barriers, the communication will not be effective or it will not be successful. Hence, the barriers will be there, which will act as a hindrance for the success of the communication. However, communication is not always successful. Many of the time the communication will not be successful because of the availability of the barriers. Okay. Certain barriers in the communication affect the clarity, affect the accuracy, effectiveness of the message. Okay. Several times it can be prevented by the message for reaching the intended recipient or from having the desired effect on the recipient. For example, now your internet connectivity is not that very good, then what will happen? The video will stuck. Okay. That will act as a barrier. Okay. Likewise, there may be some faults in the communication system as well, like for example, the default or the faulty telephone line, that can be a barrier. Now, we will try to discuss about the various types of the communication barrier. See, there are several types of a communication barrier. In that, we will try to discuss these barriers, which we have classified as a semantic barrier, organizational barrier, interpersonal barrier, individual barrier, cross cultural, physical or media and technological barrier. We will try to go through quickly about the each and every one of this. That is a semantic barrier. What is a semantic barrier? It is related to the process of coding and decoding the message. Like when I am coding when I am trying to encode my message. Okay. For example, I have given an example over there. See, the site. See, if I use a site, that is SITE, you may think it is as a CITE. So, the pronunciation or the multiple meaning of the words or the similar words may be, because of which the error may or it will act as a barrier. Then badly expressed message, lack of clarity, lack of precision makes a message badly expressed, lack of coercion, awkward sentence structure, use of lot many jargons, technical terminologies, okay, which usually in the normal or the general conversation we will not use. That kind of a jargons will act as a barrier. Wrong interpretation, when some interprets a symbol, this understanding may differ from others. Okay. Wrong interpretation, you mean to say something else, but I understood something else. Okay. So, I am interpreting wrong. For example, if you are attending, okay, for example, we can take this itself. Now, you are attending a communication session. Okay. Once starting of a session, you may say that what is there in communication, we know all these things. See, the wrong interpretation. Many of the time, even one or the two okay, things you may learn out from this particular session. Okay, that is what. Then the technical language, that is what I said, technical terminologies, jargons. Okay, if we use too much in the conversation, okay, in the communication, then that will become a barrier, and these kind of a barriers we call it as a semantic barrier. Then the next one is about the organizational barrier. Okay, what is organizational barrier? See, these kind of a barriers arise because of the environment or the culture which is prevailed in an organization. Like for example, the organization culture and climate. Okay. For example, in I want to name the country, in many of the country, okay, in many of the countries, if you are attending a very important meeting, you have to wear the black coat itself. If you are not wearing a black, that means you do not think that particular meeting is important. See, that is what the climate or the culture. Okay. See, many of the time, if I does not know a culture or a climate of a particular organization, particular society, then I will not be able to effectively interact or effectively communicate with those people. Okay. That is what we call it as a organizational barrier. Then organization rules and regulations, too much rules, too much regulations, okay, or too little rules, too little regulation. For example, the IT industry, very few rules and regulations, whereas in the army, the extreme rules and regulations. Okay. So, if a person jumps from army to the IT industry or the ITES industry, they will find it very difficult to cope up with, to communicate with these kind of a people, or the vice versa is also true. Status relationship, many of the time because of the status issues. For example, how can I communicate with my superior, or how can I communicate with my subordinate? See, the status issue will come into a picture. Likewise, the next one is lack of cooperation between the superior and the subordinate. Many of the barriers, many of the what do you say, the hurdles, the problems, the what do you say, the hurdles or the problems or the conflicts, okay, a particular word, conflict. Many of the conflict will be resolved only when there is a cooperation between the superior and the subordinate. If all things they are working for an organization, then the communication will become easier, the communication will become smoother, the communication will become clear and yet very effective, and the barriers can be overcome. Then the interpersonal barrier. In the interpersonal barriers, it is dependent on the interpersonal relationship between the two people. Okay. The lack of proper channel, because say for example, if I am speaking with my friend, I will not be formal, I will be informal with them. Okay. Likewise, if an unknown person is there and if I am interacting with them, then I will try to become formal with them, isn't it? Likewise, lack of proper channel. For an unknown person, if I become informal, if I become more friendly, then the communication can't happen. If with my friend, if I become formal, then he or she will understand it in a different manner, isn't it? So, the lack of proper channel. If I am speaking with my student, the way of communication would be different. If I am speaking with my colleagues, the channel, the way would be different. If I am speaking with my authorities, the way and channel would be different. Okay. So, the proper channel has to be chosen. No interest to communicate. Okay. If I does not have an interest, okay, if I does not have an interest, or if you does not have an interest to listen now, can I force you to listen? You may pretend that you are listening. If it is a classroom, you may pretend you are listening to it, okay, but actually if the person is not interested, then it will become interpersonal barrier. Lack of cooperation, lack of trust, the poor relationship between the superior and the subordinate, fear of the penalty. What is the fear of the penalty? See, many of the time, for example, in a classroom, okay, in a classroom, a person, if I have a doubt, many of the time what I will do, I will not ask a question thinking of what others will think, whether if they laugh at me, what will happen. See, this is what we call it as a fear of penalty. Many of the time we doesn't come out for the communication just because of the fear of penalty, what the society will tell, what the others will feel. See, this is what we call it as a this is an example of a interpersonal barrier. Then the next one is individual or psychosociological barrier. In this, the style, selective perception, halo effect. What is halo effect? Understanding on the basis of one particular characteristic. Okay, this person doesn't look good. So, what is he going to tell us? See the halo effect. Okay, you look at a slide and see what is this? I already know all this. Halo effect. Okay, you understand the entire Indians are like this. See the halo effect. Do you think all the Indians are fall with the same category? No, isn't it? So, it is an example of a halo effect. Selective perception, you select on the basis of your perception. Okay. For example, with the mobile, okay, what is mobile meant for? Communication, entertainment, isn't it? So, whenever you take a mobile in your hand, the first thing is you will either open up a WhatsApp or a Facebook. You do not think as a means of a learning. Why? Because our perception with the mobile is entirely different. Then status relationship, poor attention and retentions, inattentions, defensiveness, closed mind, state of a health, filtering, these all will come in the individual or psychosociological barriers. Then the cross cultural or geographic barrier. Okay. In this, it is the total way of living built by a group of people and transmitted from one generation to next generation. Okay. For example, why I am wearing this particular shirt? Because it has been passed on from my father to me. Okay. Or now we are trying to adapt with the Western culture. See, earlier our forefathers, okay, used to wear the jubba pajama, but now my father started wearing the shirts, I started wearing a shirt, my next generation will also continue the same tradition, okay, until and unless there is a drastic changes which will happen. So, the national characteristic or the basic personality will act as a barrier. Language, now we see English is a global language, wherein every corner of the world will able to understand the English language, but if I start speaking in Kannada language and if you are not Kannadigas, what will happen? It will become a barrier to you. Or if I start speaking in another language which you are not able to understand, it will act as a barrier. Values and norms of the behavior, my values are different, your values are different. If it contract, then it will act as a barrier. Social relationship, concepts of time, space, non-verbal communication, perceptions, these all will together, we call this as a cross cultural or a geographic barrier. Okay. See the words, colors and symbols. For example, if you are in England and if you have been given the invitation for a dinner at 8, that means at 8 itself. In Greece, it may be a 9 or 9:30. In India, it may be even later, isn't it? In some parts of the world, nodding your head means agreement. Shaking your head like this means no. But in certain part of India, if you do like this, then you are saying yes. If you do like this, then you are saying no. A vice versa is there. Then when the Japanese say yes, that means they are listening to you. But what the English people or the American people will think, that they have agreed for you. Okay. Likewise, wearing a white color on marriage may be forbidden in some culture, but it is a tradition of another culture. Okay. Wearing a white color shirt is a tradition, whereas in another culture wearing a white color is forbidden. Okay. So, these are the cross cultural or the geographic barriers. Then the next one is physical barrier or the channel and media barrier. Okay. Physical distraction with a lot of a noise, often literally sufficiently insulated room, that is no proper ventilation, no proper air, okay, too very hot, too very cold, then you are not able to concentrate on the communication. So, that is what we call it as a physical barrier or the channel or the media barrier, okay. Or even the arrival of a coffee at a critical stage, when you are communicating, all of the sudden your friends come in, okay, someone offers you a coffee, okay. So, the breakdown of a communication will be there, okay. Constant telephone interruption, that can also be a barrier, and that is what we call it as a physical barrier or a channel or a media barrier, okay. Like for example, it may be a noise, it may be a environment, it may be defects in the medium, like a faulty line, okay. So, the technical aspects in the communication barrier. See, the few technical aspects in the communication barriers are barely narrated by the Murphy's laws on communication. See, what is the Murphy's laws on communication? Okay, this is what the Murphy's laws, and he say communication usually fails, okay. Not all the time the communication will be successful, communication usually will fail. If the message can be understood in the different ways, it will be understood in just the way that does the most harm. See, I will read once again. If the message can be understood in different ways, it will be understood in just the way that does the most harm, okay. I hope you can understand. Then it refers to the sender manipulating the information so that the receivers will see it as more favorable, okay. See, the sender will always try to manipulate the information, facts, figures, emotions, so that the others can able to feel that, or other can able to understand that particular thing. Likewise, the next one is meta communication. In the communication, apart from the message, there is a meta message, there is a very bigger message, that is what the meta message. Meta message exists in the people's mind because of their action, such as being hard to contact. It is the most important thing in seat word language, okay. I want to communicate one thing to you, okay, but you understood it at another thing or in more bigger way, that is what we call it as a meta communication. Then how to overcome the barriers in the communication, okay. If you are able to clear the W's and H, then you will be overcoming the barriers in the communication. That is, the first one is who, to whom should the message go. If you know who are the audience, who are the receivers, then you can clearly, if you know their perception, if you know their behavior, if you know the person, then it is very easier for you to communicate with them. Then why should I communicate? What are the motives behind my particular communication? If you are able to understand that, then the way you communicate would be entirely different. Then what? Decide what to communicate. Be clear about what one needs to communicate. Now, I know there is a need for the communication classes. So, I am trying to communicate with you, that will answer what. When the best time to optimum reception is chosen. See, when we have chosen this particular moment, why? Because the examination are very much nearing, okay. If the examinations are after 1 year and if we have started now, will you take it seriously? I hope so, I hope not so, isn't it? So, when it has to be started, how? What is the means of a language? What is the use of a language? Which language shall I use? Which the receivers will understand and which is unambiguous, and where? Choose a location which will not interference with the reception, understanding and the acceptance of the message, whether it is privately, whether it is home, whether it is office, in a group, at a workplace, outside, depending on the kind of a communication, depending on the kind of a person you are trying to communicate, try to choose it wisely. Where? If you are able to answer these 5 W's and 1 H, then many of the time you are going to overcome the barriers of the communication. Then with the receiver's perspective, okay, you have to be, as a receiver, I have to be fully attentive to the sender. That is, with all open ears, I need to listen to them if I am involved in a verbal communication. Listen actively to the message being sent. Ask for the clarification and repetition wherever the necessity arises. If there is a doubt, if you are not cleared about certain thing, stop and ask for a clarification. Then keep checking the receipt of the information with the sender. Okay. As a receiver, you have to cross check this, so the communication can be successful or to overcome the barrier. For both the people, try to realize that misunderstanding are bound to occur and be alert for all the clues to their effect. Okay. Misunderstanding will happen. Okay. So, be ready or try to understand the clues, so that to overcome the misunderstanding. So, what is the way? The way is only to listen, listen and listen again. Okay. Try to share your opinions, feelings and perceptions generated by the message, information. Then only the communication will be successful. Okay. So, to summarize, we have discussed about the barriers, that is semantic barrier, organization barrier, interpersonal, psychological, technical, cross cultural and physical barriers. Okay. Now, this is okay. This is what the coverage of whatever happened so far, that is understanding the message, the nature, objectives, concept of communication, characteristics of communication, types, process. We have discussed about the barriers of communication and how to overcome the barriers to communication. Okay. Now, let us quickly try to discuss about few of the questions which I have taken from the earlier NET question paper, NET question papers. Okay. So, let us try to understand few of the questions. See, which of the following are the characteristic features of communication? So, what do you think? Which are the characteristics? Communication involves the exchange of the ideas, facts and opinions. Yes, it is one of the characteristic. Communication involves both information and understanding. Yes, it is also a characteristic. Communication is a continuous process. Yes, it is also a characteristic. Communication is a circular process, that is, it is a circular process which will never end. So, all the four are the characteristics of a communication. So, the right answer is the fourth one, that is A, B, C and D, that is all of the above. Then the second question is, when verbal and non-verbal messages are contradictory, okay, when the verbal and non-verbal messages are contradictory, okay, say for example, if I am, whatever you say, if I am trying to say yes, yes to you, what do you understood? Yes or a no? No, right? So, when the verbal and non-verbal messages are contradictory, the people will believe on the non-verbal message, that is the C1. Okay. The people will believe only the non-verbal and not the verbal, because the words can be false, but the emotions, the feelings will not be false. Then the third one, what are the barriers to effective communication? Dialogue, summary and self-review, these are not the barriers. Moralizing, being judgmental and comments of consolation, yes, these are the barriers. If I become judgmental, if I try to moralize, if I try to pass on the comments in between, then what I am doing? I am creating a barrier there. Okay. Use of the simple words, cool reactions and defensive attitude is not a barrier. Personal statement, eye contact, simple narrations also are not a barrier. So, what is the answer? The second one, that is moralizing, being judgmental and comments of consolation is a barrier for the effective communication. Okay. And the last one for this session is, imagine you are working in an education institute where people are of equal status. Which method of communication is best suited and normally employed in such a context? Okay. See, what it says, if you are working in an educational institution and you want to speak with your colleague, so which method you are going to use? Okay. Whether you are going to use the horizontal, vertical, corporate or the cross communication. See, we will rely on the horizontal communication, because they are of the equal status to us. Vertical, if we are going to discuss or if we are going to communicate with our supervisor or our subordinates, then we will rely on the vertical. Corporate is the entire communication in an organization we call as a corporate communication. Cross communication between, for example, a sales manager is trying to communicate with the supervisor of a production department, that is a cross communication. Okay. So, with this we have come to an end of a first session of communication. In our next session, we will try to discuss about the effective communication in brief and about the classroom communication. Thank you.